everyone. Thank you for inviting me here today. I want to thank everyone here joining. Super grateful to have you here and super excited to have the little game jam happening soon. And yeah, I wanted to talk a little bit about working remotely. I recently started a new job where I work remotely all the time, so I noticed that this is something that could be possible for a lot of people in the island. So I figured, why not talk about it a little bit to see if anyone can have some use out of it. So, for before getting started, I want to make sure that I am setting everyone's expectations just right. I want to make sure that if you have questions, that's I'm probably gonna wait until the end to answer them, just to make sure that I cover everything real quick. But I'm happy to stay as long as needed to answer any questions that might pop up. So this talk won't be about where to find remote jobs or like where to apply for a remote position. This talk kind of assumes that you're either interested in working remotely, you've never worked remotely before, or it's just you just want to look into it, you know? Job hunting is a separate topic, and I'm happy to answer questions about that later. So this talk is also not about what's the best software to use when working remotely. I will mention some useful tips to have and some useful tools that you could use. But overall, like specifics of software, it's really up to you. The other thing is, this is not about presenting working remotely like the best option out there, because quite frankly, kind of it's not. It's in my opinion, I still like more being with a team in a close space, but it is a good option to have. So just wanted to make sure that everyone was on the same page regarding this. And yeah, this is not about a step-by-step guide to working remotely and like how to be successful remotely. This is not that guide. Now, what this talk is about presenting this other option to work as an alternative, because there's a lot of people hiring game developers, and often they start looking in other states and other countries. Like when they don't find what they're looking for, they start looking into remote options remote as a possibility, and like there are like a number of indie studios mostly hiring a bunch of people remotely, and I know that AAA studios as well, they kind of hire outsourcing studios. So it's like it's this whole thing. It's gonna keep happening. So you kind of should get somewhat prepared, or like get ready to work remotely. I don't know. This talk is about as well that remote work is not for everyone. It is very useful, but like many things in life, there is a number of reasons that some people might not like working remotely. It could be like, for example, distractions. There's a lot of distractions when you work from home. There's some self-motivation issues, especially if you've been all day cleaning your house and then you have to get to work. It's kind of a, do I really have to? So, yeah, like there's always something. But let's say you have a personal situation that requires you to stay home for a couple of weeks. It's often better being able to work during those weeks than have like that pay like docked and just not make any money. So yeah, this it's not for everyone, but it should be at least something that everyone should consider at some point. This talk is as well about working with people and remembering that, well, humans are emotionally fragile creatures that sometimes have really bad days. And yeah, like they go on their lives putting a brave face to make sure they don't worry anyone about their bad day. But like we don't really know when those harsh days happen, and we don't know who's getting affected by them. So like just it's just like a little something to remind ourselves. Is you never know when like what people are dealing with. So let's see what else. And yeah, working with yourself in a way. These are a lot of tips and techniques that I have gathered through life experiences for the most part, both working in games and outside of the games industry. And this helped me understand different ways to hold myself accountable. So most of what I will talk could be applied to other areas in your life, but it also touches a little bit on yourself. Let's see. So, Wepa, I'm Jeb Alvarado. I'm a games producer. I help cool teams reach deadlines and ship games. That's my tagline. I'm from Aguadilla. I was raised there. I started my career, I want to say, 8 years ago in Puerto Rico, working on educational and strategy games. That's my first my first published game, Barricade. There's a little shot from that. Let's see. Right. So I am currently based in San Francisco. I am working as a producer for an unannounced project at a place called Studio Decay, and that game is being published by Annapurna Interactive, which I have the opportunity to work with some of the people that published like What Remains of Edith Finch, Florence, Outer Wilds, Sayonara Wild Hearts, and most recently, Wattam, which was a PS4 and PC game that I worked for. I was a producer there as well, and it just shipped this past December 17th. Let's see. And if you're wondering, then yes, that is laughing poop running away from a toilet while wearing a flower hat. That is correct. So, let's get started. So, why talk about working remotely, and how is this relevant to game jam where it's not necessarily remotely? Well, let's look at the big picture. Let's look at the big picture and start exploring that a little bit, right? So why is this talk relevant? So, game jam games can grow. Game jam games usually start very weird, very broken, patched together with duct tape and anything that you can find to make sure it works. But sometimes these games are really, 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 really cool, and you want to keep exploring them. And there's been some success stories from game jam games like Goat Simulator, for example. It's one. Classroom Aquatic, it's a VR game where you're a dolphin in a classroom and you are taking a test. You have no idea what the test answers are, so you have to cheat by kind of looking around to your classmates. It's really weird. It's super fun. There's Super Hot, was also a product of a game jam. Let's see, and Surgeon Simulator was actually made during a global game jam. So, yeah, these things happen. And the other part is like games can be worked on remotely regardless of what limitations you think you may have, right? For example, the Game Dev Tycoon was worked on remotely, like their team worked remotely. And also the game that I'm working on is also a game that's being worked remotely. Like all my team members were 8 in total, and everyone is across different states and different parts of the world. So we are all gathering together and live inside Slack, and there we just tackle the project together. Let's see. So let's talk about some pros and cons of this remote working. So some of the pros are you get like the opportunity of a more flexible work-life balance. Like you can choose when your work hours will be for the most part, and you can decide whether you want to tackle this in the morning, at night. If you want to change your sleep schedule, that's on you. Like it's really like based on your needs, you know. In addition, that gives you more time with family and or pets if you're a fur parent. But let's say you have kids, cousins, parents, or like family members to care for. It's a good option, you know. It's a good option. Virtually, you can do everything these days. Like the internet is a blessing, and we can travel anywhere. I am here with you guys. May I continue then? Let's see. What else? It's becoming a common practice. As I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of large companies and indie studios just looking out there because they can't find what they're looking for in their state. Or what happens often in San Francisco is that the state is very expensive. So they look for other states where the artists, the engineers would be cheaper for them, and they could stay there, keep their studio afloat that way. You know, like it really, like, obviously it really depends on like how expensive your city is and all those tiny details, but you could negotiate higher things because of this ambiguity, you know. Moving on, we have the technology. Is 2020. We have the technology that allows us to communicate with people overseas, share work with each other, make games together, track our work, and share confidential or sensitive information, right? We can do that these days. And most importantly, not most importantly, but very conveniently, I would say, you're given a very important choice that not many have the option to, or privilege, might I say, which is you can choose what to wear or what not to wear during meetings. Like, you don't have pants? No problem. You put on a nice shirt and you're ready to go. Like, you don't have shirts? No problem. You turn off the camera and you're ready to go. You know, like it's not an excuse, you know. So it's just a silly thing that I find super fun about getting into last minute meetings when I wake up late. That said, let's start talking about the cons. So, I mentioned earlier, it's easier to get distracted. Like, it's easier to miss deadlines. Sometimes we're receiving mail packages. Sometimes it's just the TV show is too loud and you're getting constantly distracted. Someone's cooking or you need to cook. Like, someone's playing a game that you want to play. Like, distractions are everywhere. So it's something that you somewhat need to work on because otherwise it will happen. Overworking, that is a big risk. We often get caught up. We don't notice the time. And suddenly you start working, 5 minutes later is like night and like it's the next day. I don't know, like you know what I mean. Like hours have passed and you're like where did this time go? And like you didn't realize that you spent all your day working and you worked extra hours unnecessarily, not unnecessarily, but your own, like as I see it, when you do that, you are somewhat using your battery levels and you're just going down, and there's a point where you just won't be able to keep functioning. So it's really easy to get caught up, and it's something that we should keep in mind while working remotely. Now, office management, that's another thing. You are the office manager. You're responsible. If the lights go off, you need to handle that. If the internet is bad, you need to handle that. Like if you need to do some constructions in your place, like you need to handle that. All these there are, and a lot of these are very tiny things. A lot of these are very small things that could be handled in a matter of minutes. But for the most part, this content switching, and I think I've had experience with a lot of engineers that feel the same way. It's just like working on a task, and then you have to start working on another task. You don't get like focus on that task initially. You just start getting into it, start ramping up, and by the time that you get good at it, you start switching again, and it's like, okay, so I need to start again. And those little startup times are what really, when you add them up, really gets us behind in our schedules. So office management, in a way, sounds a little silly, or could sound a little silly, but yeah, it takes time, and that's what you need in here. What else? Slow turnaround. That is also a big con when working remotely. Overall communication gets slower. Like you send a message and maybe that person was eating at the time, so you have to wait until they're done and they'll message you back. It's like sometimes it's super difficult to put out a fire because like you're just talking to someone, then person B runs off or goes offline, and we need a person B to solve person A's issue, and it can get a little complicated in that regard. But for the most part, if you have some rules set in place, or some, like, for example, regular meetings or regular checkups, like these things can be somewhat avoided. But yeah, if you're working with time zones, it's gonna get delayed. So like anytime that happens, you're gonna have a weird issue there. And yeah, like this one is a little ambiguous because not knowing what to expect, like especially if you don't know, if you haven't had much experience working remotely in the past, it looks for some people it looks really attractive, and it can get really easy to get comfortable, but also to not do the actual work. So you don't know what's going to happen there. Like also when you're working with other people that are working remotely, you don't know if they're good at working remotely. You don't know if they're like if they are distracted as well, and like that affects the entire project scope. So in a way, like that's why I added that in there, because like it happens, and I don't think it applies only to working remotely, but it's something that affects. Now, for starters, what you need to work remotely: a workspace. Simple. But basically just like a dedicated area. You need a dedicated area that you can go to and not be bothered. And like if you live with people, they know that they can't bother you when you're in that area, or they're like just when you're there. And sometimes like Starbucks helps, but reliable internet is another thing that is kind of useful, but that's another topic that I'll touch up in a bit. But basically, having a place where you're going to work is very important, as it is having a work machine. That is to make sure that you can handle your workload. Like sometimes people have better computers in their homes than in their works, but sometimes it's the reverse. So if you know that your machine can't run the project that you're working on, then that's not really a work machine option for you. What else do you need when working remotely? You need to make sure that you have the correct software. Make sure that the softwares are up to date, that the version control is the right version, like the engines are on the right version as well, and yeah, like any other type of software, modeling software, or like I don't know, just make sure that they're all in the same version. And is it could be so silly to have an issue that takes a lot of time to solve, but you can have an issue that could take a lot of time to solve, and then you figure out that in the end that the problem all along was that you downloaded Unity 2018.1 and it was supposed to be Unity 2018.3, and that was the issue. The game wasn't broken. There wasn't an issue really. It was you that installed the wrong version by accident, and so it's something to make sure that you keep in mind. Let's see, what else? Secure file transfer method. For the secure file transfer, like this can be anything from setting up FTP, or like having Google Drive or OneDrive, or having a Dropbox that you can share your content. Like just a place that that you can send the link and it won't be public. It won't be leaked by the media or whatever. Yeah, and especially if you're working with stakeholders like publishers or like investors, they really don't want their work to be public before it's done, because for the most part they have either a marketing plan or strategy that goes in place, and like you shouldn't mess with that. So having a way to transfer file security is a must. What else? Repository access. You need to be able to connect to the repository. You need to be able to play the game and submit your work. This is something that usually gets handled as you start a project, especially if you come in later on. Is something that usually is brought up, but it is something that if it isn't brought up, you should ask about. Like, hey, can I have access to the repository so I can work? What else? So this one's kind of rare, but VPN access is sometimes very important. Mostly for engineers, but I can say like there are developers like Sony that they have, like they set a static IP. They use your static IP to give you access to their developer network, I guess. And if you're logging in from any other IP, it won't let you log in. So like it won't even let you get into the page. Same goes with when it comes to the dev kits and the test kits. When you're working with those, if like they also have a static IP, so if they're not set, you won't be able to update them or download any games into them, or like whatnot. You could work with a USB drive, whatever, and transfer, but it's not ideal. Like in this case, you should have someone helping you out with this VPN stuff. Like that should be in if you're at that level developing for people that require static IPs, because I don't know. And I guess last but not least, reliable upload speed, like good internet, really good internet. I can't stress how important the upload speed is, because internet service providers are all about the downloads, and that is useful. That is very useful. But when you have a 4 gig build uploading the night before your deadline at like 2 megabytes per second, the most, it really sucks. Like it really gets you in a place where you get worried. Especially what happens if when it's at 90% it decides to crash or like get corrupted or like fail the transfer. Let's start again. Fun, no? So internet is important, is what I'm saying. So I think this is about it when it comes to how to work. I can talk about some tips that I would recommend that have worked for me in the past, and I wanted to include here. First, here's a baby hippo. It had a cute mouth, and I just wanted to add it. So that's about it. Thank you. So remote work tips. Let's see. You need to make sure that you have a comfortable workspace. It's where you're gonna be sitting down most of your time, when you're working on your projects. So it's really good to have, or really convenient to have, a good chair, or like if you like doing, like if you like standing in your desk, like having a good standing mat, like having ergonomic keyboards or ergonomic mouses, if you have the money, like those eye protecting glasses that help you with screen work, like that help you not affect your eyes as much. But basically, just try to find ways to make your work more comfortable, because you're home and you can't escape anywhere else. So like it's very suggested, I guess. What else? Setting start and end times is crucial, because of what I mentioned earlier about overworking ourselves. It's easy to get caught up in work and forget that we have a life, forget that we have to eat, forget that we had to go out at some point. Actionable tip that I could give you for this is using time tracking software like Toggle or any of those, not necessarily to send over records of the time that you worked, but mostly to give yourself an idea of how much work you're putting in, if you put in enough work. Like, for example, if you finish with this great task and you notice that you've worked, let's say, 7 hours and like 40 minutes, and your next task is a huge task, well, you probably don't want to start that. You probably want to leave that for tomorrow, because the work will always be there. It's never going to leave. That's why it's important to somewhat set these rules. That said, same scenario. If it's a 2-minute task, you can say, okay, let me tackle this real quick. Boom. You can still feel motivated because you're still within the time frame, or you're still getting paid, I guess it's the best way to put it. What else? I would suggest setting clear tasks for the day. This is more of a production tip, but I guess it's easier to feel, or it helps to end your days with a sense of accomplishment when you set certain tasks at the beginning of the day, and by the end you realize that you were actually able to hit them. I would say that not doing this usually gets you in a role where, let's say you wrote down, I need to fix the triangle, and suddenly the triangle became need to fix the square as well. Ah, damn it, needs to fix the circle, and then like you end up with this list that you start creating and editing as you go, that it's infinite, and like maybe 4 6 hours in the day you realize, hey, I'm not gonna finish this, and this won't be done. So that usually leaves us kind of demotivated, because it's like, damn it, I didn't finish. But technically, yes, you did. You covered all these items in the list above, but because you didn't cover the ones below, then like it makes uh, sense. Um, so let's see. Setting clear tasks is super useful. What else? Make calling others a habit. So this one is something that I learned recently, mostly because I don't know. We like to chat. It's something that we're used to for the most part, especially during work. Like we talk through chat for the most part. So what happens is that calls can be as important as walking up to someone and asking, hey, how do you do this? Because I don't know, like sometimes a 2 minute call could save you 15 minutes or more on car insurance. I mean, on back and forth. Like it could save money there. I'm sorry, time. So you can get so much work done, and so many things across, so many points across when you're talking with someone. You can somewhat read their voice tone and understand where they're at, where with text you usually have to interpret whatever the other person is, and for the most part you're the one interpreting it and you're wrong, because it happens a lot. So calling others is something that I just started doing. It's something that my team did regularly, and they got me into the habit of doing. So it's been super useful. And I've saved a lot of time with it. And honestly, this is all about saving time, and like how do you do things that help you save time so you can do other things. So yeah, it's really useful. Finding ways to hold yourself accountable, and I don't mean like I don't know, I'm gonna do everything today, and like that's not it. Like I guess what I mean is more try to find excuses to have to present your work, so you force yourself to do it. And this, I can speak from my experience. Hopefully this helped clear the bullet a little better. I do like some checking meetings at work, just to make sure that things are going along fine during the week. But for the most part, I'm doing them to make sure that I'm prepared for those meetings and that I know that information, because that information is crucial for my role. So I need that information, and if I don't have it, then my job could suffer, and I won't have the info that I need when people ask me questions, and that could get into issues. I don't know. So I guess it's easy to get distracted at home. So like finding ways to, knowing that you need to come back to work, and I need to like send this over to the artist. Oh, I need to grab this sound and implement it now. It's like whatever. It's useful, is what I'm saying. But again, try not to shoot yourself in the foot and say like, yeah, I'm gonna do this and I'm gonna do that for today, and like I'm gonna finish this entire game jam game in 20 minutes. Like no. So let's see. Take breaks. Very important. yeah, you have limited energy, contrary to popular belief. So it's good to remember that we have to take breaks every now and then, and like every once in a while. I think that the Pomodoro technique is a very popular one, where you basically work 25 minutes and then take a 5 minute break, or work 50 minutes and then take a 10-minute break, just to step out of it and just like clear your head a little bit. It doesn't need to be 5 minutes. It doesn't need to be 10 minutes. Uh, I usually take like, maybe I take an hour break, because I got super stressed over the past 6 meetings that I had today, and I need to recharge and I need to get my energy back. So let me play a game, and I'll come back in an hour. I'll make up that time, but taking the break is important, and at least like catching yourself in when you have those needs. Usually try to follow through with those. Like it's like, I should take a break. Then like just follow through. Just like push yourself, follow through. Because burnout is real and it's bad. And if you're working remotely, track your work expenses, because yeah, taxes. You can expense a lot of your work materials as work materials. So it's good for your taxes. Sometimes there are misunderstandings with the the sellers, so it's good to have them as backup. So like, obviously saving receipts it's a given advice, but it I guess it's super important when you're working remotely. What else? Production tips. So some things that I've learned over the years are, first, the importance of asking questions. Like, you shouldn't try to start a task without understanding 100% what you need to do. You don't need to understand how you need to do it, but understanding what your goal is very crucial, because you are at risk of wasting everyone's times. And time, as I mentioned earlier, is super important. I What I try to suggest is just like try to break it down, like ask questions that like try to think about player scenarios. Try to think about like, what would a player do? Everything. The player will do everything, especially if it's super stupid, or like if it will break the game. That will be done by the player. So you kind of need to get ahead of that, and somewhat, when you get a task, try to think about it with the player in mind. And hey, so is this supposed to look like this when the player is looking from that direction? Like, these small questions can save a lot of time in the end of development. And having like that clear task is super helpful, and helps you as well save time, because you don't have to figure out what you need to do. Another thing that I found super useful, and it's kind of a tricky one, but it's transparency. Being and I want to say, like, it's crucial, especially as a producer, for me to know where you're at in development. Like, if you are falling behind, you told me that you were gonna have it done by the end of the day, and you still have half of the work done, and there's 2 hours left today. So it's important for me to know that, not to whatever make your life any harder, but mostly to know how to adjust my schedule. I don't think of production as a management role. I think of production as a support role, and I think about it as, I need to do whatever is in my power to make sure that you are working in your roles. If you're an engineer, you should be coding. If you're an artist, you should be like making art. And if you're not doing that, if you're spending time uh, doing a bunch of miscellaneous things, then I'm doing my job wrong. So, like, I feel like I need to make sure that every team member is supported, and I can take away anything that could cause them some stress. And because of that, I try to create this friendly environment within at work, and I also try to make sure that I speak in ways that can't be taken weirdly, but knowing how much work you have left is crucial. And those can be difficult conversations to have, especially if things are looking good on your end. But it's super crucial, and you shouldn't think about it as you're in trouble, or at least yeah, you shouldn't think about it that way. That's not the right way. Um, yeah, it's not personal. That's another thing. Uh, that's what I was mentioning about trying to communicate in ways that other people won't take personally. Like, as the same way, like, try not to take things personally, but it's also important for you to communicate in ways that show that you're not taking things personally. Um, Especially if, let's say, I feel that, like, let's say that there's an artist, and I tell them, hey, so there was a problem with your art piece because when players stepped near it, the texture just went super wrong. Um, there's that way you can say, yo, your art is broken, fix that shit. Like, no. Like, it there are ways to talk, to communicate issues, and you need to find ways to communicate them in a way that they're all about the work. Like, you it's not about uh, taking any personal attacks, or like receiving any personal attacks. You shouldn't allow that as well. But try to explore the whys, um, and, like, I'm trying to think of a of a good example, but it's easy to get caught up in decisions that you wouldn't take. Like, they took this decision, I wouldn't do that, but whatever. Like, they're gonna break it anyways. Like, it's that is that happens. Sometimes people will take decisions that you won't agree with. But what's important is to remember what's best for the game. Like, what will get this game out there to players? What will make this game more fun? And if both solutions give me the same result, then it's okay to pick one. Like, it's not wrong, it's different. you know if it solves the problem, then it's just different. So, yeah, just let's try to find a way, if we notice ourselves getting inside heated conversations, to find out why people are behaving this way. Like, what part of my art piece don't you like? What is it that you don't consider to be appropriate for the game? Or, I don't know, finding ways around it. It's not as easy, but it's also not personal. So that was my point. Pushback. It's important to push back. It's okay to push back. Overworking is not healthy. Therefore, you shouldn't let people throw at you more work. Like, for example, my artists in this project, they were working on a plan A for the game's art, right? And I recently sat down with them and told them how much time they would have to do that said plan A. After the meeting, I think it was like 2 minutes later, the art director calls in, and he's like, "Yo, the artists are freaking out. So what's happening with the schedule? Like, why is it so impossible?" And I just sat down with him and I explained the entire schedule. And he suggested to go over with the other artists. I go over it with the other artists because it was clear that there was a missing piece of information. They were freaking out over a missing piece of information. So I did. And as they were seeing the schedule and I was explaining them, they started to realize, oh, okay, he's right. This won't work. We need to think of a plan B. So they started there, like then there you start to hear their gears turning and just like talking about solutions and ways to cut corners. And that was pretty much like all that they need to do. They pushed back, and if they hadn't, they would be committing to an unhealthy amount of work, like a very unhealthy amount of work, unless we were to pull it off. Like I would be setting the wrong expectations to my higher ups, to my publishers. So whenever the time comes, I'm gonna be in a lot of trouble. So that is part of the pushback. We wouldn't arrive to a healthier solution if they weren't to push back. And yeah, so like just if the first thought that comes to your head is like, well, that's not much time for that, or like that's not enough time, and I guess it's time to push back. It's that time. So let's see what else. Screen calls. I went over this earlier, I would say, but basically the chat is very difficult, or rather, very easy to misunderstand. So it's easier to go over certain issues in a phone call. Like, yeah, it saves us time. And yeah, my last production tip is to listen. Like everyone is important in your team. So listen to everyone. Like I see, like communication and trust is super important. Like those to me are two constants in every relationship. Like a relationship won't work without communication and trust. So that's what I try to focus with my teams. Like I see my coworkers as my peers, my equals. Like we work our asses off. Like we are skilled in our respective roles and we all poop. So like you're not anything higher than I am. Like titles are just dictating who gets paid more and whose responsibility is to do what. You know, like on the people level, we're equals. You know, so I try to keep everyone in a good, trusty environment and foster that communication. Our life experiences, they do define a lot of who we are. And let's see. Yeah, like sometimes having like a small conversation with someone just boom gave you the missing piece for that big project, the big bug that you were stuck on. Or it's very easy to find nuggets of wisdom in different conversations. Like one of my programmers for Wattam, he was like super fun person, but he was like super shy, super respectful, like very quiet in a way. But during the meetings, during our team meetings, I would hear them discussing a feature, and then I would see him just like I want to speak, but he goes back again, and he lets the other people speak, and then when he wants to speak, he goes again, and like I started to notice that mannerism, and I was like, yo, yeah, like what were you gonna say? Boom. Whenever when I started doing that, whenever I called him, he would point out an issue that would either break the game or like cause issues in the long run. So it was like a blessing and a curse to call him, but it was important Like his voice was important. His feedback was crucial. And by everyone's important, I can also say one of my interns in Wattam, one of my QA interns, they helped optimize our QA pipeline for the game. They introduced a flow that allowed us to record game input while we're playing the game and capturing screen. That made a bunch of bugs easier to find. So everyone's important in your team. That's what you should get out of this one. Now, pushback tips. I think these are kind of like my favorite or like my most important slides, because pushback is important and is almost never comfortable. Like it's super uncomfortable for the most part. So when you're saying no, try to make sure that you communicate, like, and when I mean saying no, let's say they're offering you a new task. Hey, I need you to fix this. This got broken. I need you to fix it before the end of the day or before the end of the week, whatever. So you shouldn't take that task in this scenario, let's say. So you should talk to them and let them know, communicate your tasks for the day or for the week, let's say, and you can suggest to them like, hey, I have these tasks for today, but I can definitely handle that. Which is more important, that one or this one? If they let you decide on theirs, then you pick theirs and you work on that. But you don't take on two tasks, you switch them. You need to make sure as well that whoever's giving you the task, in this case, I'm thinking maybe a higher up, a manager or whatever, like they understand that as well, because their job is to push you, and if you let them, they're gonna keep pushing you. So yeah, try to always think what's best for the game, what's best for the team, and just be transparent. Hey, like I have a lot of my workload today, and if you don't have a lot on your workload, then I don't think you should be saying no. So yeah. I don't know if there are any other questions about this. You can let me know at the end. Passionate conversations. These are fun. Like when you're having heated or passionate conversations, most of the time they are literal misunderstandings. They are one person is talking about A and the other person is talking about B, which is very similar to A, but it differs on this point, and that's why they're fighting, because of that point not being understood. So it's not like if you start to notice like people getting heated or getting more, I don't know, uncomfortable, whatever, think to yourself, like if you're having a meeting, or if you're not having a meeting, is this the meeting or the place to have this conversation? Like in your desk, having someone scream at you is not like how to have a conversation, right? So if it's not the place, like if you see that the conversation is getting heated but also getting deviated, once it starts deviating, hey, if that's not part of this meeting, then why don't we talk about that later? You know, like let's focus this time on this meeting, or let's focus this time on this work. If it is the meeting about the thing that you're discussing and people are being passionate about, I would suggest to first off listen to as much as you think you need to listen. I wouldn't wait until people are done talking. I would somewhat wait until I understand what everyone is talking about, and I can say, hey, so it seems like this topic, it's taking a lot of our time. Why don't we move back to this once we're done? Like, well, why don't we circle back to this one? And simple, just, hey, we'll get back to this one later. Let's try to let's try to use our time wisely. So yeah, that's some tips, I guess. When it comes to decision making, or like when you're designing a feature, like you need to remember what's best for the game. What like how could what you're saying work with what I'm proposing? Like try when you're designing features and you're disagreeing on certain things, because like, oh, I wanna do this feature, I wanna do these feature. Wow, that one took me. Okay, so the word feature is banned from this talk. So when you're designing, the thing to look at is make sure that you're not throwing away ideas. Make sure that you're not like dismissing them. It Try to find ways to get them all together. Like, how could I take that and apply what I am doing? Like, where is that middle point? Or what if you do this and I can actually hook my stuff up with yours? Perfect. And like, that's probably what we needed to, like, that was what we were looking for. So it's important to ask ourselves, does including this add time to our schedule? Does removing this add a lot of time to our schedule? These are questions, like, and I talk a lot about schedules because I'm a producer, but overall, it's just a time management thing, and it's, hey, if this is gonna take us, like, overall, if it's gonna make us work more, then it's probably not the best idea, or it's probably not the best path forward. It depends on the situation, obviously. So yeah, so if you are discussing about something and you are really stuck, you can ask yourself, how much of an impact will this have on the players? Like, adding this feature, like, how much of an impact will it have? And how much effort do we have to put in to make this feature? Like, if I have to put in like a week of work, and it's if I have to put in like a week of work for a particle system that won't be shown only 20 seconds during the first cutscene of the game, then like maybe we don't want to waste we don't want to spend our time that way. Maybe this is not something that we should be focusing on. Maybe let's propose something else. So yeah, this is very open, and it really depends on situations and like specific situations. But overall, like, these are certain things that I would suggest. Sometimes there are ambiguous answers. You're asking people like how much time do you think you can have that? Like, when do you think you can have that ready? It's like, I don't know. Like, it depends. Okay. So what can you do? Like, what can we get started? And if it's nothing, then when can you know this by, so I can ping you again? You know, like, when should I bother you again? Because if this is something that you need to handle, then I will let you work on that, right? But if you notice like a hesitation in a way, or you're not getting the answers that you really need, you could throw a hypothetical, you know, like, how would you start to design this? Or like, how would you start doing this? And are you waiting on someone to finish? That's another question. Like, are you blocked right now? Like, can you work on this, or are you waiting on this person to finish their work so you can work on this? And like, asking questions is how you dissolve the ambiguity. So yeah, try to dissolve that as quick as possible whenever you can, because it can be stressful. So, takeaways from this talk. It's 2020. We have the tech. Anyone can work remotely. Anyone can work, but it's not for everyone. Upload speed matters. Like, good internet is crucial. Download speed is important, but upload speed is, I would argue, as important. communication and trust. Like foster that good communication environment within like your friends, your workspace. Like let's try to remove the toxicity out of this industry and like make an effort for that. And yeah, let's see. Is possible to finish games remotely? Like that's a possibility these days. So that's something that I hope you took from this talk. If you want to practice working remotely, this is a website you can visit. It's pretty much a calendar with a bunch of online game jams happening and offline game jams, I would say, but happening throughout the year. And if you are interested in working remotely, then maybe you want to start mingling in there and find team members remotely and mess with that. Or in the case that when you leave the global game jam, you find that you really want to keep jamming, then like you can just look for one in there and just jam it out. And yeah, like it's important to remember, like a game jam game could be your next hit. Like you could come up with something that you love so much that you just want to put out there. You have the tools to get it out there. You can work with anyone over the world, so that's not a limitation. Money can be, but that's another topic. So, in a way, it's just like I want to make sure that everyone somewhat got out of this that working remotely is an option. It's not the best option, but it's a very useful one when you have no other one and when you have like weird situations happening in your life. So with that, I can say thank you and happy game jam. I don't know if anyone has any questions. I think I took a little over an hour. As I wait, there's my info in case you need to ping me. That's my website. My studio right now is hiring a 3D environment artist, environment concept artist, and an illustrator / animator. So if you're interested, there's the website. You can look into it, and if you feel like the art style is something that matches what you want to work, and like if it looks like something that you could get that could get you motivated, then throw us an email. You can apply directly from there. Would a timer and a stopwatch work? Yeah, hell yeah. For like, I'm assuming that this question is about tracking your work or keeping track of your work. Solrock Amarok. But the principle is the same. Like just time yourself so you can have an idea of how much time you've been spending on a certain task or on a certain day. Like if you have an hour that you can't really you can't spend more than an hour, then time yourself. Boom, and you can have that there, and you will know that you won't be going over. But the principle is that, basically. Do you think remote jobs are the future of the industry? I don't think, if you think the future as in what everybody will be doing, I don't think about it that way, but I think it will be very common for people to work remotely. Like, I think in the coming years, it will be, I feel like it will be weird if you can't work remotely from from a game studio, I would say. Like, it feels like there's that, and a lot of it has to do with all the crunching, all the studios firing people, all these things create the insecurity, and it creates a lot of what you would call it, chaos in a way, you know. And it's important to take care of your employees. It's important to take care of their mental health. If you treat your employees well, if you treat them nicely, they will give you your best work. So with that in mind, I feel like the push from crunching and all that got us into, hey, we should try to take care of ourselves a little more. Let's push for more mental health initiatives for game studios and make sure that we're getting, everyone is getting some rest and whatnot. So yeah, I think it might be somewhat a standard soon, but not like the standard. Mostly like very common. I would think. Yeah. Thank you everyone that joined. I'm really grateful to have you watching this. It's important for me as well. Like, I'm getting some practice out of public speaking, so like I really appreciate that you spent your time with me. So thank you so much. I'm gonna be around, but I will cut the feed. If you need to reach me, feel free to reach me on my website. That's my Twitter account. And if you want the slides for this talk, that is the place to find them. The bit.ly work FTFH, work for there from here. So if you're interested in the slides, then they're there. So with that said, thank you everyone. Thank you for joining, and yeah, have a great jam.